really well-known track, or just like a really big club hit or something. That kind of really helps keep the crowd locked, because then, when those tracks come on, the energy is usually just electric, insane. Like everyone just like, loses their mind, and they really love it. And it keeps them locked in for those tracks where they don't, might not know it. And, they're going to discover new music as well. Because I think that's a really interesting thing that a lot of people might not think about, is like, like DJing and going to shows and stuff is a really great way of discovering new music and new artists, especially if it's like a support act or something. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And so when going back to the question that I asked you earlier, when you're trying to select songs for your set, how do you build the energy up? How do you take it out for a minute, get a real feelsy part? How do you go about doing that?
I think the key to high energy, especially for when you're doing like drum and bass, is like mixing from drop to drop. So, not having any breakdowns for like maybe 2 or 3 tracks, but then making sure you don't have that kind of relentless like drop kind of thing. You need the breakdowns, and depending on the length of the breakdown, you can really give people the room to breathe and then bring the energy down. And then those kind of breakdowns, especially tracks that are, quite melodic or quite ethereal in those breakdowns, no drums, kind of more kind of silky kind of sound, that's where you can start transitioning into this kind of softer music. And I think you just have to play it by ear and just kind of feel how it should flow.
Absolutely. And I think this is directly correlates to what I was talking about last week. For everybody listening at home, you only have 10 minutes for your mix in the mix contest. So how are you able to keep the energy high? Just like what Protostar said, you go drop to drop a couple times, and then you take the energy back down, really let everybody feel that low of the breakdown, and then get back into some high energy things. I think that's absolutely great.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about intros and outros for a second. How do you go about selecting how you want to start your set, how you end your set? What's your theory on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, track intros, like intros to a set, is kind of I don't know, it's a somewhat of a big decision. I mean, it depends on the crowd, right? If you go into a show where everybody knows you and stuff, you could always just start with a classic of yours. Like for me, I've got several tracks I like to pull from. Like if I'm starting a show, like I could pull from like In It Sequence from my from Sequence EP or something, and that's like literally designed to be an intro track and then mix into anything else there. Or you could start off really hard if you really want that energy just to be right in the face, and just like start off with something that really kicks in, doesn't have any kind of intro, just like wham. It totally depends on the crowd or like the venue and what kind of people you're playing to. So scoping out what kind of people are going to that kind of show and the areas that what kind of shows are usually played there is definitely key there, I think. But also developing your own style is a really important thing as well. If you are always going to be doing sort of like those kind of hard intros, then that might be a cool thing to develop into your brand. Or you could always go for like these kind of more cinema-esque intros. I know Muzzy often does those kind of like very cinema sounding like string intros and stuff at his shows, and those were quite cool. They kind of set the mood.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very much a sucker for those cinematic intros. Really gets the feeling of where you want the set to go.
Mm-hmm.
You can only go up in energy.
Yeah. Another cool thing I like to do is starting off with like a rock track or something really kind of out of left field. Like I think the Monster Cat Electric Brixton's show, I started off with Killing in a Name by Rage Against the Machine, and then I mixed that into a Camo and Crooked track. I forget which one, but yeah, that stuff is quite fun to do as well.
Yeah, great way to subvert expectations but still have your sound present in it. Yeah, absolutely. And I think going right off of what you said, really important that you get your sound into the mix as an artist, like show your style of DJing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So let's talk about key and BPM. Are you like a stickler on everything has to be in key? Do you kind of go with the flow on some things? How do you feel about that?
And when it comes to melodic tracks or stuff that has quite strong core melody or key, then yeah, definitely mixing in key. But I generally like when I mix harder sounding stuff, so more atonal, more kind of just deep or dark sounding drum and bass or whatever, then key doesn't really matter, especially with like build-ups. Like the best way to transition from key to key when it comes to those tracks or just tracks in general is having build-ups that have like quite an atonal sound to it, where it's like a lot of noise rising and pitches are rising. There's no real kind of concrete center tone, those are really key to kind of transitioning from like key to key very smoothly, because then you've got a lot of noise transitioning. You don't necessarily have the mixing key. You can just use that to transform into the next track.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And so one big thing with the mix contest this year, we've given everybody 3 acapellas, and they have to use one of them in their mix. So for mashups and using acapellas in general, do you have any advice when mixing with those acapellas?
Well, honestly, I've never even mixed a cappella before, because I've wanted to, but I've never really kind of like bothered to go do it. I just generally just do it on the fly with an actual track, and I'll just mix it in, because I play on CDJs obviously. But I'd say, like, obviously, I think the key is obviously mixing a key, but using it in an interesting way can be quite interesting, like unexpected ways. So maybe even chopping things up. Using it in not the same key, but using the circle of fifths, so you could use it in a perfect fifth, and that might work. So stuff like that can be really interesting and a really kind of unique way to use like an acapella. Absolutely.
So for the artists at home, do you have any recommendations on how to stand out from other DJs? And it's a tough question, I know.
That is a very, very tough question, because myself, I'm not even sure I know that myself, like as much. I guess especially when it comes to like actual like stage presence, that's a definite thing where you can definitely kind of craft your own kind of style. So it's not even just about like how you mix a lot of the time. It can be how you kind of present yourself, how you are, if you're on the mic at all, if you only have like an MC and stuff, like that stuff can really kind of push into your brand. So like certain DJs, especially in drum and bass, they'll never get on the mic. They'll only have an MC, and they might even have one MC that they bring on every time. Like they'll try get them like with them, and stuff like that can be really like a really kind of side supplemental thing to solidifying your kind of brand as a DJ. But that, along with like the format you're DJing as well, that's a really key thing. So for example, Andy C is known as like vinyl drum and bass. We've got AMC. He's known as an absolute god on CDJs, because he mixes so fast. So there are loads of different ways of kind of solidifying your skills and your style. You don't have to mix insanely fast. You don't have to use 4, 6 CDJs. There's definitely some creative things you can do with 2 or 3 CDJs, etc., or just even using things like Ableton and doing that kind of thing, doing that live. So there's a lot of different avenues you can take to kind of solidifying and kind of forming your own identity when it comes to that.
Very great. Very great. So this one might be another toughie for you, as I know that you love drum and bass, but going genre to genre when mixing, how do you feel about how you go about that?
It totally, I guess it depends how you do it, because you've got the classic, lock the pitch, or sync it and then push the fader up and kind of in the breakdown or something, which is a cool way. I think the best way to do it is finding supplemental BPMs. Like for example, I like personally to go from drum and bass to glitch shot quite a lot, because you can almost halve the BPM and you can sync it up, so it's almost like halftime. So if you just speed up the glitch hop track a bit and bring down the drum and bass track, you can line it up and then transition quite easily into that. There's also stuff like drop mixing, where you would, for example, let's say one track starts fading out on the outro, and then as that singular hit on the outro hits or something, there's one hit and there's no more drums, you then press play on the other track, and then that will start. And that's a good way to kind of, it's a cheaper, quick way to kind of transition. But it totally depends on how abrupt it is. I feel like you can go really startling. I like to do a thing when I transition to house, like where I do a tape stop or like a vinyl stop effect, and I'll go into Internet Friends, which has the glass breaking sample, and it goes psh. And then as soon as people hear that, like knocking sound and stuff, then they know what's going to happen. And it's like one of those tracks that will erupt the dance floor as well. So it's like, it's a 2-in-1 thing where you're changing the BPM, but because it's a track that everybody knows, they're just like, oh, when they start jumping, and like, it's a very, very, really, really good way to like kind of get the hype around like a transition like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great. And for all the people listening, there are countless tracks on Monster Cat that you can use to really, maybe let's say, go from a drum and bass song that has a huge impact on the end, and then you go into a house track that has that really catchy intro. It might it won't match up BPM, but the sound might be there that you're looking for.
I think, yeah, like picking stuff that has like no drums in their breaks as well is a really good way of transitioning. So like if you have an outro that fades out or like has like no drums, and then like a breakdown or an intro of the second track that has no drums but just one impact, if you line those impacts up, then because they're like kind of trailing off and they they don't have any kind of rhythm, it's going to be a lot easier for the dance floor to kind of adjust, because they're going to stop dancing during that part. That's the key. If people are going to be dancing and then the beat changes suddenly, then it's really like stutter, like it really shocks them. But if you just slowly transition that, and if it's like a track that they really know, that's where I think like the key is to kind of making it like really, really fun.
Yeah, I think that's the fun part about DJing, is it doesn't have to be perfect all the time. So long as you convey the energy and the feeling that you want your set to, then everybody has a good time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to look through the chat here to see if there were any questions that popped up for you. Let's see. Going. All right, so none yet. If you guys want to ask Proto any questions, feel free to drop them in chat here. Otherwise, I'm going to keep asking him different DJing techniques that he likes to go with.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people talking about Crab Rave. How do you feel about Crab Rave?
Well, I have the dub plays, so
little secret.
Yeah, I mean, like it's kind of a classic meme at this point. I play the bootleg like once in my set every so often, just for fun. But yeah, I don't know. It's like it's a fun little thing, I guess.
Absolutely. Okay.
I don't mind playing those fun kind of tracks, like in sets. It just kind of lightens the mood a bit.
It takes away from being so serious, and it's like, all right, everybody just have a good time here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so let's talk about some of the guidelines that we set out for this year. So we have brand inclusion, we have mixability, which I think we've covered a lot in this with tempo transitions and all that. There's creativity, and then risk versus reward. So I'm going to go into brand inclusion first. What are some good ways that you feel artists can go from Uncaged to Instinct to Silk and back again and blend those all together?
I think like kind of, because obviously like 10 minutes is a very short amount of time to mix. So it's going to be, you're gonna have to have a lot of like quite a little amount of time to play with. But I guess maybe, I think the best way might be using like acapellas to transition from one, like layering the acapella of a different like branded track in, like for example, like get an Uncaged track and layer like an Instinct acapella on top, and then when that starts to break down, then transitioning with the actual instrumental underneath of the other track, and using that can be a good bridging method, because it's the same principle in production, where when you transition from one section to another, the best thing to do is keep a few elements that are the same continuing over, and that will allow you to transition a lot more smoothly. So using the same principle in mixing, you can achieve like a much smoother mix and a much smoother transition.
Absolutely. I think that's really helpful. And I think that goes right into the creativity element, where you're trying to get the most creative transition, but also seamless transition.
Yeah. And
so on top of that, do you have anything to say to creativity? Because there's so many different ways that you can go about it.
I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I'm going to be surprised probably tonight, because I know I don't really listen to a lot of Ableton or DAW mixes, so I know there's going to be a lot of those tonight. I will be very surprised if there are any live like a CDJ mixes, and if someone does something very creative on that, I will be very impressed, because I think obviously doing DAW mixes is still quite challenging and stuff, but obviously there's another level to it, to doing it live, like completely live. So I think that's going to be, for me, seeing someone do some kind of creative stuff where it's like actually like on the decks is going to be quite interesting to see if anyone does that.
Yeah, over the years we've had maybe a handful of people that have submitted with a live mix, and there's definitely a different feeling to them, for sure. Yeah. For sure. I know in the year that I competed, one of the other contestants was playing live the whole time, and it was a very neat sound.
Yeah.
And then finally, let's go over risk versus reward. So obviously we want people to take risks in this mix contest, but we also don't want them to go too over the top and ruin their mix. So how can you take risks and have them pay off? Oh
god, that's a really like kind of almost like an abstract question, I guess. Like,
oh, for sure.
give me a kind of like a concept you're thinking of, like in terms of that, for like risk versus reward. What would be a good example?
Let's see. So I guess maybe like taking a silk track and somehow managing to get into an uncaged house drop or something. It all comes down to how the mixer goes about it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess I think the best way to go around that is like, you know, it depends on like where you're transitioning into. Because if you're doing like a big transition and it goes into something that isn't as much of an impact as the listener's expecting, then that's gonna kind of hit a bit less. I think like the key thing to balance is expectation versus surprise. So I use the same concept in music production. You want the listener to be equally as pleased for something happening that they expect, but also equally as surprised at something that they didn't expect happening. If there's too much of one or the other, if there's too much predictability, then it becomes too boring. If there's too much surprise, then it becomes too random. So you need a good balance of both.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I see a good question from Beat Plant here, and he's wondering, do you ever prepare mashups before a live set, or is everything live?
No, yeah. I do mashups sometimes. Like it depends. The main time I will do a mashup before is like for like sometimes, for example, like for a rock track, if the BPM is like it varies quite a lot, because then you can tighten it up and just make it not drift as much. But you know, I've been playing, for example, like I've been playing a lot of virtual reality shows over the past year in lockdown, and I've been having a lot of fun experimenting with my style that, you know, with things that I wouldn't necessarily want to have done in front of a massive crowd in real life, because it's like, that's kind of a big risk versus reward thing, but it's been fun to just kind of play around. So I've been playing things like Paramore, Sum 41, just like old rock tracks that kind of like, you know, a lot of people will know, and like doing that live completely and mashing that up has been really fun. So I definitely think doing stuff live is I don't know, it's just a different feeling, you know?
Yeah, I think that's great, and a very, very fun way to end this little conversation. Before we get into the review submissions, is there any last bit of word of advice that you want to give everybody?
I mean, I guess, you know, good luck everybody in this competition. Don't take it too hard if you don't win. I think, like, obviously we're going to see an insane amount of talent tonight. So, yeah, good luck. And I can't wait to see, you know, what you guys show. And then obviously you might take away some advice that we, you know, spoke about here for, you know, your mixes in future.
Absolutely. And I think that's great. So yeah, let's get into these submissions. We have genuinely quite a few to get through today. So if we do not get to your mix, I apologize, and we will very much try to get to it next time. If we listened to yours last week, we see yours in the queue. We're just going to make sure that we get some new people in, and then we'll get into the resubmissions. So starting us off, we have Hasty Entmoot, and I apologize if I butchered your name at all, but let's get right into this.
Force.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to pause it there. But honestly, I thought that was a really great way to open up with your mix. It was very feelsy, but not like cinematic. There was enough energy to it. And then going through everything, that was a nice transition into Silk. And finally, just what Proto and I were talking about with using the little sound effects that are at the start of some songs, you did that in that last transition and got it into a very different feel. So, Proto, do you have something else to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the transitions were quite clean. Obviously, I think there was an a cappella use at the start, and then we went, we transitioned through to that house track, and that was a very nice kind of, mood change into a BPM transition there, very nice and slow. And that kind of gradually kind of lifted the mood up into this kind of dark kind of mood at the end there, which I feel like was quite nice.
Absolutely. And I thought that was a really neat way to have all the different brands included, but still very much feel like your mix, like Hasty's mix. And I thought that was very neat.
Yeah.
So Hasty, yeah, I don't really have much to say about that other than I guess just a little bit of EQ work on that Silk mashup that you had in there. There was a bit too much low end, I think, at points, but past that, really solid start. Keep working at it, and can't wait to see when this is done.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Enderin, and yeah, here we go. All right, so I think that's a good place to cut it in the mix. So first off, I'm sure you all saw I'm singing along. I absolutely love sing along feelings and mixes. That's very fun for me as a DJ. So let's break down the technical aspects for a minute. I think like a minute and a half in, you had a really fun art playing. and I think there was just a bit too much low end on it. But I think you keep the ARP in, just cut the low ends, and maybe push it back further in the mix so that it's still present, but you're able to hear the song that you're supposed to sing along with. The addition of the throttle track that was there at the time, I think might have been overdoing it, because I think it clashed with the chords a bit too much. But again, that might just be an EQ thing. You can play around with it. And then finally, that build up into that last drop, I think was really well done. Again, I don't normally like transitioning with drums over a large tempo gap, but I think it worked for that. And then that mashup right at the end, I think might also be a less is more moment. So try to pick out the little elements that you want to shine through in that mashup, and then take everything else out so that it's not sensory overload for the listener. And Proto, what did you have to say about this one?
Yeah, very cool. I did like, there was a good amount of like, mashup going in there. I did think it might have been a bit too much at some point. Like, it felt like, almost at every point in the mix, there was like an acapella or a mashup or a different mashup there. So I think stripping that back a bit and kind of letting some tracks kind of, once in a while kind of shine like as their own is a good thing to do. So, like you said, less is more. And I definitely feel like there was, I think at one point in the middle where there was a pad being overlaid on top of a track, and it was kind of muddying up the sides for me on the lows and the mids. So maybe high passing that or just cutting that out completely would be better there. And at the end, I feel like I agree with you when you said the whole like less is more at the end. I think that drop could maybe be stripped back and maybe just only a few elements there with the mashup here and there, kind of adding in some kind of more surprise elements rather than it being like half and half.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, don't be afraid to just play 2 tracks in a mashup. Like that might be the best way that it can sound and convey the feeling that you want to for that mash.
Yeah, because I guess there's like a few different ways you can do it, like with chopping, and then like just straight double dropping where you play one track and then high pass another track and run that on top.
Exactly.
2 different ways. There's many more, but those are the kind of main ones. But they each have their very useful utility.
And I think that's great. Yeah. So overall, really solid mix. I think going back to it, less is more is what you can really take away from listening to that. Next up, we got Mostrino. Let's go.
Awesome.
So yeah, I thought that was extremely well done. I loved how it built the energy all the way in through those 3 minutes, and then really hit you hard with that dubstep drop. And so I'm just gonna go one step at a time here. The intro I thought was really solid. I liked the inclusion of the Dreamers mashup. You got your one in, so this is a acceptable mix now. We can use it in the contest. So yeah, going through that, I thought that was mixed well on top of the layers, really ambient beginning, let the listener go into the mix, and then you just hit them hard like 3 minutes in. I thought that was really fun. How you played around with the souvenirs acapella and made it like really distorted right before that dubstep drop and matched the energy that was happening in the original song. I thought was very, very fun. The last drop I didn't think was too much over the top. It was getting close at points, but I liked how you were changing it and making it your own and your own song, really. So that was really fun. Proto, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much feedback on that one, I don't think. Yeah, I feel like the kind of transitioning with the energy was really well done. You know, slowly ramping that up. Definitely kind of eases the listener into that kind of energy. It'll be exciting and interesting to kind of hear how they progress after that, you know, because it does, you know, build up to quite a high point there and 3 minutes in. So it's going to be interesting to see if you maintain that energy after that, or if you're going to start dipping it back down, or what you're going to do. Because I guess the problem with like building up to that point there with such a heavy track there is that you either have to keep going up or kind of similar, or you're going to have to really bring it down. So it'll just be interesting to see how it progresses from that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mastrino, going back to last week's stream, we were talking about hills and valleys, and I thought that was a really nice gradual hill building up to like a peak. And if you can hold it there for a bit and then start to bring it down into some more like feelsy tracks, I think that might work really well for your mix. So yeah, solid submission. Really enjoyed listening to that.
Yeah.
Next up, we got JD.
Awesome.
All right, so we finally got your drum and bass on this one. JD, let's talk through this one for a second. So I think the intro, the feeling was really cool on it. I think it just dragged out a little too long, and especially if you only have 10 minutes in your mix and 30 seconds of it is you having that really atmospheric and risery intro. I think if you cut that in half, you can still get the same feeling without taking a lot of your time away. Into the drum and bass drop, I think it was a really neat idea. The little vocal chops or synth little stabs that you had in there, I think they just need to be EQ'd better so that they can fit better in the mix and not muddy up that mid range. But overall, it's a good start to it. Just keep working at it. Continuing on, I thought you did a good job of raising up the energy, kind of holding it there ever so slightly, dipping down, and then building it back up. So yeah, I think energy-wise, you did a really solid job with that. And yeah, biggest takeaway for me, I think, is just EQ work. Just really, really go in there with a fine tooth or whatever. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. My brain stopped there for a second. Yeah, really go through there and cut out the lows. See if you can even like get some dips in there, like little valleys, and cut out parts to help those little stabs fit in better. And I think that'll be the great takeaway for you. Proto, what do you got to say about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you kind of spoke my mind, really. I really loved the kind of mashup with the world track there, especially at the start with, the Rogue's vocals was really, really cool. But I think during the drop, those arps were definitely a bit too much in the low and low mids for me. I could feel they were taking up a bit too much room around there. So I would probably high pass them around like 300, 400 hertz, kind of remove some of that low end and mid range, just kind of free up that room. And I feel like the transition at the end was pretty cool, kind of changing that mood up and that key. But I feel like, I don't know if it was when it came to the drop, there was still some kind of like, stuff trailing or around that kind of transition part. I feel like it could have been maybe tightened up a bit more and kind of faded out quicker and like, high pass quicker and just kind of tidied up a bit there. But it was really, really cool transition.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Next up, we have J-Tility. Let's jump into this one.
Awesome.
Pack our bags tomorrow, leave all of our sorrows, see where all this road goes, maybe San Diego, maybe San Diego, roll down all our windows, just see where the wind blows, one leg out the window, sit like a flamenco.
Yeah, so I think that's a good place to stop it on that one. J-Tility, I think the intro was really cool. I really liked how you changed the key with a very original, but also like sampling method. I thought that was really neat. The actual transition into the next song that you used, though, I felt kind of fell a little flat for me. It came out of the blue. So I think if you're able to like sprinkle elements in over that first part before you actually make the transition, so it's not so sudden and just out of nowhere, I think might really help that fade in. Continuing on, I think main thing for you is EQ, and that's been the highlight of today. But yeah, just go through, make sure that when you're playing more than one song at a time, that only one of the songs has the low playing. Otherwise it'll get muddy and things will start to overlap each other, and it won't sound nice to the listener. And then when you're also including acapellas or different elements of tracks, try to make sure that they all are around the same level volume wise, because that Half an Orange track that was coming in at the end, the vocals were definitely a lot more powerful than anything else that you had played so far. So kind of just find that nice balance in there and get them to be equalized. There we go. EQ. Proto, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, I really love that, playing that Haywire track at the start, kind of quite nice piano intro. And then that, like you said, that kind of sampled kind of key change was really out of the blue. Like it took me by surprise. So I really liked it. But then it went into that, the next track. And I feel like, for me, like the rhythm got a bit lost, mainly because that track had this snare in it that was like hitting like quite syncopated, both of them. So I was like trying to lock into a rhythm and I couldn't really find it because there was no real kind of solid kind of rhythm, and the track itself felt a bit out of the blue. So I wasn't really sure about the song choice. I think for me, like the song choice felt a bit strange, like connected to each other. So maybe a bit more rethinking on what tracks might work well together, going from one track to another. I feel like it kind of jumped from genre to genre to genre too quickly. I feel like there needs to be a bit more kind of connective tissue between the tracks.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. Like the creativity element in the risk versus reward, I think really sold me at the beginning with that key change with the sampling, and then from there you kind of lost me with the mixability. So I think if you can find ways to better blend through the tracks, I think that'll really help out this submission, because that beginning like caught me off guard and definitely made me want to listen to the rest of the mix.
Yeah, I think maybe even if that could be playing to your kind of style thing. Like if you've done that kind of sample key changing thing, maybe even like kind of using that as your strength in the mix and going for more of that, like coming up with unique ways to kind of change BPMs or change keys and stuff like that. For example, if you take my track, Scorpion Pit, for example, look at the transition from the start of that track in the middle and then to the end. And in the middle, you have a 140 BPM, and it changes to, I think, 100 something BPM. But it does it by it goes ding, 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 ding. And then that transitions into a triplet into the next section, because they are, mathematically compatible. So stuff like that can be a really cool way to kind of play with interesting transitions. And I feel like you could use that to your strength and have like a really interesting mix where it has like all these kind of unique sampling kind of things.
Absolutely. We want to see your artist stamp on the mix, and Protostar just knocked it out of the water with that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so Proto, we've come to the end of listening to these mixes so far. Unfortunately, it's almost the top of the hour. So do you have any last bit of advice for the mixers at home based on what we've listened to here today?
Yeah, I think obviously when it comes to, you're mixing, with 10 minutes is a very, very tight mix. So you're going to want to pack as much as you can into it. But I feel like there's an art form in knowing how, like, when to strip things back and just play, like, for example, a raw track or something. So my tip is, like, for example, those tracks that you want to do just a single thing, use like a really big, well-known track that's going to get everyone hyped. Like a classic or something is a really good way to do that. And just don't be afraid of just letting a track kind of speak for itself. Not everything has to have an a cappella, and not everything has to be like, double dropped or mashed up. So keeping that balance, having some tracks speak for themselves, also doing stuff like simple double drops, like, because I feel like people always do like, chopping and a cappella laying, but doing like a simple effective double drop, like, for me personally, like I'll always like really like appreciate two tracks that are double dropped really well, that really mesh together, like just in their original forms with a bit of EQ, because obviously for me, like I'm a CDJ guy at heart, so I'm always going to lean to more towards that kind of style. But I feel like it kind of allows the mix to breathe a bit more and allows the tracks to kind of mesh together. So using, for example, one track that's very stripped back, and then another track that has like a nice kind of mid to top end element, and layering that on top. For example, when I'm speaking from like my own catalog, something like Meltdown can fit really well with a double drop because it has a very scooped mid range where there's not a lot going on apart from that one kind of percussive lead, and that lead can either fit on top of another track, or you can just scoop out the mids from that as well and fit a different lead inside that. But it obviously has to be generally triplets as well if the song is triplets. So a few things to kind of play with there. But
yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it there with that last bit of feedback. Thank you. Everyone at home, thank you so much for joining us today. Proto, thank you for listening to these mixes with me. I know I enjoyed them. I'm not going to speak for you, but I hope that you did.
No, yeah, definitely.
Fantastic.
It's good fun.
And we will be back next week. Proto will be gone, but I will be back next week for one last mix submission review before everything closes on June 16th. If you guys are watching this and you have no clue what the mix contest is, head on over to monstercat.com/mixcontest2021, and I'll put it in the chat here in a moment as well. And you can find all the rules, you can get your downloads package, and yeah, we can't wait to see what you put in. Everything we listened to today, very excited to listen to the full mixes. And until next time, Proto, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you guys later. Have a great rest of your days. Bye.
Bye.
Let me think for a second now. Catch my breath. Yeah, I gotta slow down. Cause when you're near, everything that I planned just goes